Hello all, and welcome to week 3 of Ethics 2100 Online. I wanted to say just a few quick things at the beginning of the week here. I thought that the discussion board conversation for last week went fairly well. It didn't appear that we came to any general agreement regarding the role of natural law, although there were several very good points made. Truthfully, this was a pretty tricky topic, really, to get our minds around. For on one hand, there does seem to be something correct about the idea that in order to be morally permissible, something should be natural. On the other hand, it's a really difficult matter, I believe, to define natural in such a way that excludes only the things most people would want to exclude, while allowing only those things that most people would want to allow. Now, there were a few interesting proposals made by some in our class, however. One of the proposals that stood out for me was Vincent's suggestion that whatever was necessary for life and survival should be considered natural. Now, there were some issues with this definition, to be sure, and actually I wanted to give a shout out in particular to Lindsay for asking some, actually several on-point and challenging questions throughout the discussion. But I do wonder if there is a way maybe to tweak Vincent's definition to make it even more defensible against some of the kinds of objections that were brought up. And, let me know if you ever have any thoughts. I'd still love to hear them at any point. One thing I did want to point out, however, is that when we're discussing natural law, the issue is not so much whether something feels natural. Okay, so clearly what feels natural will differ from person to person, as some people did point out. However, what we need to know is what is natural. In other words, not so much what feels normal to us, but rather when do we say that something actually accords with nature itself. This is the sense of natural that natural law theory employs, at any rate. Next, I would like to say a quick something about our quiz from last week. One of the questions asked, which of the following captures the difference between Hobbes and Aquinas? Now, the best answer there was this one. Hobbes appeals to happiness in this life as opposed to eternal happiness. This is the best answer because while both Hobbes and Aquinas say that happiness is our aim in life, Hobbes, as an atheist, does not believe in an afterlife, whereas for Aquinas, the Christian theologian, of course, the goal is eternal happiness in connection with God. Now, a few folks chose this choice. Hobbes appeals to natural law, while Aquinas appeals only to God. The reason why this isn't the best choice is because, as we saw from the chapter, appealing to the commandments of God is itself a version of natural law. Okay, so at any rate, please let me know if you have any other questions about this item. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to do in this announcement is to mention that the topic we're discussing this week calls for a bit of an open mind. And what I mean by that is this. What we'll be discussing this week is the idea of moral relativism. Now, this is the idea that morality is somehow relative to a society, or if you're talking about moral subjectivism, which is a version of moral relativism, morality is relative to an individual. Now, a lot of people claim to think that this kind of idea is true, and in fact, there have already been a few individuals in our discussion boards who have expressed views that are similar to the idea of moral relativism. However, I believe that upon closer reflection, the reasons for accepting relativism aren't so clear. For instance, take a practice such as female genital mutilation. And if you don't know what this is, just do a quick Google search. But just be prepared for some pretty graphic pictures if you do. Now, millions of women and girls have suffered from this practice, and thousands die. do we really want to say that there is no right or wrong to the matter whatsoever? That it's a purely relative question from a moral point of view whether or not girls have their genitalia painfully removed. Now, just to make everything clear up front, I'd also like to point out a distinction between cultural relativism and moral relativism. Cultural relativism simply says that beliefs and practices vary from culture to culture. Anthropologists adopt this perspective when they study other cultures because in order to study other cultures objectively, it's best to keep one's own cultural biases out of the picture. It makes all the sense in the world, right? However, moral relativism is a different idea. Moral relativism is the idea that because cultural differences exist, there is never a right or wrong to any ethical question. Now, this is no longer simply a method for studying anthropology in an objective way. This is now a moral claim, and it's the claim that we'll be examining this week. Okay, and one final clarification before I let you go here. I wanted to point out that the main contrasting view to moral relativism is called moral realism, sometimes known as moral objectivism. Other books, other authors, philosophers sometimes call this view moral objectivism. Now, moral realism says that there are at least some true moral claims. Now, notice that this does not mean that we can know for sure the truth of every moral claim, right? Sometimes there may be objective truth to the matter, sometimes not. Nor does this view necessarily mean that we have a right to enforce a particular moral truth, right? There you get into, like questions of political philosophy and the rest, right? All moral realism says is that at least sometimes some answers are objectively better than others when it comes to morality. So, I'll be looking to hear from you in the discussion board this week, and partially because of the technical nature of some of the material we have, and partially because this is an issue that I'm particularly intrigued by, you'll probably be hearing a bit more from me this week in the discussion. So, let me just say this, okay, and I mean this sincerely. If I direct a comment or question your way, please know that I don't mean it personally, right, or that it comes from a bad place, right? It really is, I'm just interested to hear what you all have to say. And so I guess the last thing I'll say here is have a great week, and please, again, any questions about the course, you know how to reach me. Have a good one.